Hi, Dinesh. Good
Hey,
evening.
good evening.
I actually forgot about announcements. This is our last Refuge in the Three Jewels class. So thank you for coming and sticking with us. It's been a really great class. Thank you, Robbie. And then we have a couple of weeks on break, and then the last Monday of February, if I'm not mistaken, it's the 26th, we will start establishing a daily practice with Hamit, and same time, 7 o'clock. We'll see how long Hamit goes, if he'll end at 8 or 8:30. And then, of course, we just had a wonderful weekend, or 4 days, of our healing sand mandala, that was happening here with Geshe Sangpo and 2 other visiting monks. It was really beautiful, and so we'll have another one coming up, a mandala of peace and prosperity, or Green Tara, coming up the second weekend of March here in the Kadampa at Kadampa Center. And then the third weekend of March, they'll be doing one off-site at Community United Church of Christ, right there on the corner of Wade and Dixie Trail. There are parking lots off of Dixie and off of Wade. So keep your eye out for that as well, and hopefully you can bring friends, family, anyone and everyone is invited, and it's to be a benefit to all, to everyone. So, okay, I think we can get started if you're ready, Robbie.
Yeah, okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our last session on taking refuge. Let's start with some prayers in the Gold Prayer Book, page 34. So we'll do refuge and bodhicitta 3 times in English, and then the 4 immeasurables once in English, pausing after each line. And we've talked about the meaning of the refuge and bodhicitta prayer to some degree. The first 2 lines are going for refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, or Supreme Assembly, which is a term used here, which is the subject of this module. Then the second 2 lines, we talk about practicing giving and other perfections. This refers to what's called, this is another list, of course, the 6 perfections, and they are generosity, morality, patience, joyful effort or perseverance, single point or concentration, and wisdom. Concentration referring particularly to that state of keeping the mind on one object, wisdom referring to an understanding of reality. These are considered the 6 perfections, and they're good qualities to have, but they're made perfect according to the teaching of the Buddha when they're done with the bodhicitta motivation, the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of others. So this is a very high stage on our spiritual practice. We achieve bodhicitta, and then we work on developing the 6 perfections in our mind. That's really getting us close to complete enlightenment. And we may not be that far along our path, but certainly we can practice the unperfections, these nice qualities, maybe not done with complete bodhicitta, but we can work on all 6 of those. So that's to achieve that last push towards enlightenment as we work on the six perfections. So that's what giving and other perfections refers to. Generosity, morality, not harming others, patience, joyful effort, concentration, and wisdom. Okay? So we'll start with refuge and bodhicitta 3 times. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perceptions, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Okay, and now we'll do our first meditation. We begin by establishing the posture. And I think everyone is familiar with the aspects of the posture. So I'm not going to describe them, but just scan your body from the top of your head down to the soles of your feet and identify any sources of discomfort or tension and address those now so that they don't become a recurrent theme during the meditation. And the posture should really feel like you're solidly grounded, like you're in a very stable, solid position that's just going to maintain itself. It doesn't take any muscle tension or effort. It just kind of is. Down through our energy channels, down to the pelvis and the legs on the floor. And now we can take 3 slow, deep breaths from the abdomen with the stomach expanding on the in-breath and contracting towards the spine on the out-breath. So just do that 3 times, nice and slowly. And now we allow our breathing to return to its normal pattern. And we begin our meditation by setting our motivation. And as much as possible, we generate the bodhicitta motivation, the wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, even if it seems a little artificial or forced. It's beneficial to think that way as we begin our meditation. And having set our motivation, we begin the meditation, the simple concentration meditation. Mind awareness on the physical tactile sensation of the breath moving in and out through our nostrils. Mind directly on the breath, nothing intervening. And every time we wander off to something else, we gently bring the mind back to the breath, to the chosen object. And we'll do that for about 10 minutes. And we can end our meditation by doing a dedication. We can acknowledge that we've done something out of the ordinary that's made a positive imprint on our mind stream. And we think, may that imprint not be lost or dissipated, but may it grow and ripen in a way that benefits all sentient beings. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to do tonight was I wanted to go back and clear up some information I presented last week that's a little bit disorganized. I wanted to talk about the precepts and vows and get that a little bit clearer. I kind of made a mess of it to some degree last week. We talk about precepts and we also talk about vows. So let's see, the precepts that we take with the refuge ceremony are referred to as the 5 lay precepts. And these are no killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, or intoxicants. Okay? This is something we take one time. They're lifetime vows. And this is straight from the FPMT. I checked with them. You can take all of them. You can pick and choose, or you can take one of them, or none of them. Okay? So this is something you do mentally. You're not writing it down on a card and then in any kind of registry, but you have that choice. And according to the FPMT, it's across the board, no matter who you're taking refuge with. Okay? And then later on, if you're more comfortable with one or some of them, you can add those. But when you take the refuge ceremony and you're taking the lay precepts, you have that option. Okay? Then we have something that are called the 8 Mahayana precepts. Mahayana refers to the greater Mahayana vehicle, which is the type Buddhism that we practice here at Kadampa Center. It's where the aspiration is to becoming completely enlightened. So it includes these 5, to which you add, does anybody know what the others are? No listening to music or dancing, yeah. Dancing, what else? No wrong foods, that's the last, yeah. No wrong foods at the wrong time. So this refers to black foods, which includes onions, garlic, radishes, certain foods that are said to increase your energy in a way that disturbs your mind. Wrong time means basically you have to start eating before noon, and you can continue to eat, but after you finish that, there's no more eating for the rest of the 24 hours. And the third is not sitting on high thrones or high beds, okay? Which means, putting yourself above others. These are taken for 24 hours, okay? This is not for the rest of your life. No listening to music or singing or dancing. The first time you take them, you have to take them from a qualified master. After that, you can take them on your own in front of your Buddha altar, or just sitting in your car on the way to work. You can say, I'm going to do the 8 Mahayana precepts today, and do that consciously. These are done for 24 hours, and you can do them over and over and over again. And particularly, it's said to be particularly auspicious to do them on certain holidays, like the anniversary of the Buddha's enlightenment and days like that. Okay? So these are referred to as precepts. Okay? Then next we have vows. And I messed this up last week too. Okay, there are three types of vows. The first is the pratimoksha. Sanskrit word. Prati means towards, moksha means enlightenment. And these are the monk and nun vows, okay? If you're a novice monk or nun, you take something like 42 or 48. And then when you become fully ordained, you take between 250 and 350. There are somewhat different vows for monks and nuns. And these come from the teachings of the Buddha that are referred to as the Vinaya, okay? So these are not Vinaya vows. They come from the teachings of the Buddha, which are sometimes said to be divided into three heaps, three big categories, one of which is the Vinaya, which is instructions for monks and nuns. The second, which is the Sutrayana, which is what we study here at Kadampa Center and what we're talking about in this is open teachings, the Lam Rim, basically. And the third heap is the Tantrayana, which are the more, sometimes they refer to them as hidden. They're not really hidden, but they're not out in the open as much teachings. So there were three categories of teachings: Vinaya, Sutrayana, Tantrayana. These vows are found in the Vinaya teachings, and they're called the pratimoksha vows. So not relevant to most of us yet, but maybe we'll encounter them at some point. Then we have the bodhisattva vows. Bodhisattva vows, which you can take over and over, and they're the primary vows and the secondary vows. The primary vows are 26 and the secondary are 48 or something like that. And these are mainly about when you have the opportunity to benefit someone, you're vowing to do that. Okay, and these can be taken over and over. And then we have the tantric vows, which we take whenever we're receiving a tantric empowerment. And these are specifically related to that tantric deity that the empowerment involves. Oh. Secret tantra is referred to as secret mantra is another word for tantra, and the vows would be the secret mantra vows. Yeah. Okay. So the pratimoksha vows are for monks and nuns. The bodhisattva and tantric vows are for lay people and monks and nuns. Okay. So I hope that clarifies some of the confusion I sowed last week. And then we have the two types of precepts: 5 lay precepts and the 8 Mahayana precepts. Okay? Oh, the 8 Mahayana precepts, the no sexual misconduct one becomes a little bit stricter. It's no sexual activity of any kind for 24 hours. Okay? No listening to music and dancing, no wrong foods at the wrong time, no sitting on high thrones or beds. Okay? Any other questions about that? The Geshis have taken, they've taken all of them. They've taken the Vinaya, the Bodhisattva vows, and the Tantric vows, yeah. Well, that would only be when they're during 24 hours if they take Mahayana precepts. And I don't know if they're really going. I think those are kind of superseded by the Vinaya vows. Yeah, okay. The Mahayana precepts are more for lay people. I don't think a fully ordained monk or nun would take those precepts. Yeah, that'd kind of be like going back to kindergarten. Okay. Any other questions or comments about that? The question is, if you take a tantric empowerment, are there specific vows and practices that would be unique to that empowerment? Yes. The vows are going to be different for each empowerment that you take, okay? And then typically, if you take a tantric empowerment, if you're not just sitting there to receive it as a blessing, as is sometimes said, but you're actually taking it, actually getting permission to do the practice, there's usually a commitment. And sometimes the commitment is advertised in advance, sometimes it's not. You know, you hear these stories of making a commitment to go off and do three-year retreats or something like that. Usually they're not much more doable than that, but they involve reciting a mantra or doing the visualization every day, or to reading a text or things like that. Sometimes you'll know the commitments in advance, sometimes not. Yeah. So they're tantric vows, which is pretty, kind of cast in stone. And then the commitments are at the discretion of who's giving the empowerment. Okay.
And I'll just add that there's highest yoga tantric initiations, and those are the ones that usually come with the, if I'm not mistaken, with the daily commitments. Sometimes the lower tantric initiations wouldn't have a commitment. So so there's like several levels of.
Yeah, of course, there are 4 levels of tantric empowerments. This is covered in the module on Tantra. The lowest level is what's referred to as Kriya Tantra or Action Tantra. And then there's highest Yoga Tantra. And those are basically the 2 you'll encounter. I forget even the names of the 2 in between, but it's either going to be the lowest level or the highest level. And the highest level is more complicated. So you have to have some trust in the teacher who's giving the empowerment that he's going to do what's appropriate for you. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, so say we've gone through the refuge ceremony. We've said this is the path I want to follow. I've made this commitment to myself and to the teacher who's given given me refuge. So how do I put that into practice, or what does that mean from here on out? And again, this is an area where there are lots of lists. Okay. And there are a couple lists here that I would like to go through. The first is a list that was kind of put together by a Sangha, who was a great teacher, and he had a text that had 2 lists of, or actually 2 sets of 4, okay, 4 things to think about or to put into action if you've taken refuge. And these are not vows strictly, but they're kind of guidelines that he gave us. And he said, if we think of the 3 jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, in terms of the Buddha, the historical figure, we can act upon that by committing ourselves wholeheartedly to a spiritual teacher in this lifetime, okay? Which a lot of us may not have a spiritual teacher that we want to commit to. So it also means looking for a spiritual teacher. Okay, if we take refuge in the historical Buddha, we should be committing to a teacher in this lifetime. And it's said, in some texts that you should look check someone out for 7 years before you acknowledge them as a teacher, which is not necessarily realistic if you're not on top of a mountain in a monastery in Tibet with nothing else to do. But if you're living a life here in the West, but the point is it's not something to be done lightly. Okay, so commit yourself to a teacher and their guidance, or at least begin looking for a teacher, not with a sense of desperation that I've got to find a teacher, but with an understanding that this will be very helpful for me on my spiritual progress. Okay? In terms of the Dharma jewel, there are 2 guidelines that the Sangha gave us. We should study the teachings of the Buddha, and we should specifically pay attention to those teachings that help us overcome our disturbing mind, our disturbing attitudes, which are typically attachment, anger, and ignorance. So if we're taking refuge in the Dharma, that means study the Dharma, okay? And in particular, study those teachings that help calm your mind, that help subdue the disturbing attitudes. And if we're taking refuge in the Sangha, a Sangha, this is a person, a Sangha, A-S-A-N-G-A, said we should follow their example, okay? See how they comport themselves, how they relate to the teachers, how they study the Dharma, and follow their example. Not that the Sangha members are all perfect, but certainly we can learn a lot by following their example. We don't necessarily have to become a monk or a nun, but we can follow the example of the Sangha members. So that's how we take refuge in the Sangha. And he gave us 4 more guidelines that relate to the 3 jewels as a whole. The first is withdrawing our mind from the pursuit of sensory pleasures. And instead work on developing our good qualities. Okay? This is just a general guideline, not getting caught. Certainly pleasure is perfectly great, but not getting attached to sensual pleasures, okay? But instead working on developing our qualities of compassion and wisdom. The next general guideline the Sangha gave us was adopting the ethical standards of the Buddha, which basically comes down to not harming others. The third was to be as sympathetic and compassionate to others as possible. And then the last one is to make offerings, particularly on holy days. And this is something that may seem a little strange to people, and we make offerings not because it benefits the person or object to whom we're making offerings, but because of the imprint it makes on our mind. So this is really about developing generosity and devotion. Okay, so those are 4 general guidelines, things to aspire to if we've taken refuge. The first 4, 1 for the Buddha, 2 for the Dharma, 1 for the Sangha, and then the last 4 are for the 3 jewels in general. Okay? Any questions about those? Yeah. When I'm, so the question is, what am I referring to when I refer to the Sangha? And in this connotation, it's not the Arya beings, but it's the robed Sangha. Yeah. Okay, those who have taken the pratimoksha vows, okay, from the Vinaya teachings of the Buddha. Then we have let's see. The next way of the next set of guidelines is 2 sets of 6. Okay, if you can keep track of the numbers, okay. And this is from Shantideva, is my understanding, okay? And again, this is developed into 6 guidelines that are specific to each of the 3, to one of the 3 jewels, and then there are 6 that are for all 3 jewels together, okay? The first 3 of the first 6, are you all with me here? Okay. Things to avoid, okay, or not do. In terms of the Buddha, is not making our primary, not using some other source for our primary guide. Okay, which doesn't mean you have to put down or ignore other traditions. Doesn't mean that you can't learn from them and develop, but do not make another source than the Buddha your primary guide. Okay, the Buddha stays number 1. Okay, so avoid making someone else more important than the Buddha. Okay, the second, let's see. In terms of the Dharma, we avoid causing harm to humans or animals. Okay, that's what we avoid doing, harming humans or animals as much as possible. Again, these are not vows, these are guidelines. And in terms of relating to the Sangha jewel, we avoid associating with negative people, people who bring us down, who influence us in a negative way. Not that, which doesn't mean we're rude or cold or unfriendly, but we don't get into a close sort of trading sort of relationship with someone who is a negative influence on us. Okay, because our mind is fairly vulnerable at this point, so we need to be careful about that. So those are the 3 things to avoid in terms of relating to each of the 3 jewels. Now, the 3 things to do are, in terms of the Buddha, to have respect for all statues, paintings, images of the historical Buddha. Okay? You would keep it on an elevated place. If you have a statue, you wouldn't set it on the floor, you wouldn't sneeze on it, okay? Because you look at the statues and that, to your mind, represents the historical Buddha. So this is a gesture of respect, okay? In terms of the Dharma, we don't put the Dharma books or teachings on the floor. We don't step over them, okay? We walk around them. We wouldn't step over. And then the Sangha, we treat all those who have taken monastic vows with respect. And we say thank you, and we can make financial offerings to them if we are able to do so. Okay, so these are 3 things we can do in relation to the 3 jewels. And, people may say it's a little strange to respect a Buddha statue or to make putting a Dharma book on the floor an issue or not. This is something you just have to think about on your own. These are not vows, these are just recommendations. Okay, if you start to think this way, you're actually acknowledging the importance of the three jewels, and your mind will slowly start to change. Okay, so that's the first six. The next six are in relation to all three objects of refuge at the same time. The first is reaffirming our refuge by continually thinking about the good qualities of the three jewels. And we talked a little bit about that last week. And it's particularly good to think about how different, you could even say strange or bizarre, taking refuge is compared to the normal direction most of our life is headed. Okay? This is really a big change, and we think about that in a positive way. Okay? Second guideline is to have gratitude for their kindness. Okay, for the Buddha and the Sangha, and even you can be grateful to the Dharma, the teachings. Okay, develop a sense of gratitude for what they've shown us and what you've learned for them. The third one is we should remind ourselves of the compassion of the three jewels. Compassion being the wish that we be free of suffering, okay? But that's just remind yourself of the compassion of the Buddha who taught the path and of those who follow the path. Fourth, we remind ourselves of the benefits of having chose a direction that we feel safe, in which we feel safe. Having chosen this direction for our life and how we feel safe, and just remind yourself of that. Think about that on a daily basis. And that then the next one is to remind yourself, no matter what happens, no matter how bad things seem to be, even then, our refuge is the best way to deal with adversity. So when bad things happen, we go for refuge. We don't set it aside and say, oh, I've got to deal with these issues here, then I'll come back to my refuge. We remind ourselves of our refuge even in moments of crisis. And then the last guideline is we never give up on our refuge. It's something that we always turn to, no matter what happens, what ups or downs life may bring to us, no matter how good things are, well things are going or how badly they're going. We always stick to this direction, okay? So those are the 6 guidelines for relating to all 3 jewels together. So let's see, I gave you, so that was 6 and 6 and 4, and started with 4 and 4, and then 6 and 6. So that comes to 20 guidelines, not vows, but just things to think about when you say, what does refuge mean? And some of these may speak to you a lot more than others. The idea of relating to a Buddha statue may seem a little strange, but certainly some of the others are very clear. And these are all kind of guidelines to help now that you've taken refuge. Any questions or comments about that? The question is, when I say not to hold any teacher or tradition above the Buddha, is that referring to Shakyamuni Buddha? Well, it's referring to the Buddha that you take refuge in, and which traditionally is the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who lived 2,500 years ago, but ultimately becomes your own inner Buddha, okay? But most of us are not at that stage, yeah. So it's not saying, like I said, it's not saying we can't study in other traditions or other religious paths or other philosophies. But if we use that to feed into our Buddhist direction that we've chosen, okay, if we go off and put something else above that tradition, we've abandoned our refuge. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's do a meditation. Begin by establishing your posture. Three deep breaths from the abdomen. Set our motivation. And now a couple minutes of concentration on the breath. And now we're going to do a quick review meditation of the 8 guidelines or trainings from a Sangha in how to keep our refuge vital and vibrant and alive. And the first, he said, is that towards the Buddha jewel, we should commit to a teacher in this lifetime, not necessarily seeing them as a Buddha, but as an embodiment of valid teachings. And if we haven't someone like that in our life, we should look for them, look for someone who can fill that role for us. In terms of the Dharma jewel, we should study the teachings of the Buddha. And that means not just reading them, but analyzing them and meditating on them. And the next guideline is that we should pay a particular attention to the teachings that help calm our disturbing attitudes, our thoughts motivated by anger, attachment, and ignorance. And for the Sangha jewel, we should follow their example, not necessarily becoming monastics ourselves, but look at how they comport themselves, how they relate to their teachers, how they practice. And in terms of relating to all 3 jewels, first we withdraw our mind from sensory pleasures and work on developing our positive qualities of wisdom and compassion. We adopt the ethical standards of the Buddha, which basically means not harming others. We try to be as sympathetic and compassionate with others as is possible. And finally, we practice making offerings as a way of keeping our refuge strong and in our mind. And you may finish with a dedication. Okay, so that's the end of our class. Thank you, everyone. This was fun. I'd strongly recommend the next module with Emmett on developing a daily practice. That's an excellent one. How many people here got to come to part of the sand mandala? Yeah, if you weren't able to, next go around, I'd strongly recommend it. It was really quite an event, and Yeah, the center will be open again for 3.5 days.
Correct, yeah, so March 8th, Thursday, the 7th of March, and then the 8th and 9th. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the center will be open from 10 to 4. So you can come and watch the monks, actually start to create the mandala. And we have activity tables that were quite a hit in the back of the room. And there's just this amazing energy in the Kadampa. And then on Sunday, the 10th of March, we'll open the building at 10, and you can have an opportunity to see the completed mandala and take pictures and what have you. And then the monks will arrive at 10:30 for Green Tara Puja and the closing ceremony. So please join us if you can. And one more, I just remembered Losar is coming up. And so Losar is actually this coming up Saturday, and we'll have a Losar celebration here in the Kadampa on Sunday, the 11th of February. So join us. It's very family friendly. It'll be lots and lots of fun. And so, come along, bring your family and friends, and we'll have homemade Tibetan treats and things like that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Robbie.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie. Very good class. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
The Sundays of the Sand Mandala and Losar will be online, so you can join us online. All right, bye.